We're finishing up Judges, and we'll look at First Samuel next week, because there's a continuity between the books. I try to not see her. I just try not to see her.
That's hard too.
I know. She, when I'm working, she likes to be held.
Uh-huh.
In fact,
Well, she let me hold her right.
well, my left shoulder is sore because I hold her like this a long time, and I'm working with one hand, but I'm holding her, and she'll do that until I hold her, and. But her life is short. I want it to be a good.
Yes.
Well, because she wants me to hold her. She wants you to give her
treats.
I
apologize for thinking you smelled.
that you keep in your Bible. So she's digging into the Word. All right. So we're looking at Judges, and we're finishing it up. And if we look at, and we've looked at a whole bunch of different judges.
What are we starting on, so I know?
Well, we're starting on 19.
Okay, well, that's where I'm at.
As you look at the flow in Judges, if we looked at the flow in Joshua, we start with them right outside the Promised Land. And where does Joshua go? As you look at the entire book, what's the flow in Joshua?
He starts leading.
Okay, he starts leading. Yeah. And what happens as we look at the book of Joshua? In what direction does that story kind of go?
It goes in a good direction.
It goes in a good direction, right? Because in Joshua, what happens?
The people follow him.
The people follow him.
And
They
the
Promised Land and Jericho and all kinds of. And by the end of Joshua, the Jews are in the land, right?
Yes.
They have won, they have conquered, they've reinforced the covenant, everybody stands up. Joshua says, as for me and my house, we will follow the Lord. And everybody, because he's saying this from a mountain, and everybody is gathered around the mountain, and they say,
Amen.
Amen, so will we. So if we look at the flow, because we've talked about rise, and that's really the theme of the series, was rise and fall. You have this tremendous rise in Joshua. Everybody's on the same page, everybody's focused, everybody's dedicated, they're doing what the Lord says, even to the point where they don't take, they go into a city and conquer it, they don't even take stuff. The only one that does it ends up being punished, right? So it is amazing. It is an amazing story of faith and unity.
And they counted so much on Joshua.
Oh, we counted on Joshua, and Joshua was a faithful guy, and the people were following him, and God was giving them victories, and that's all wonderful. And that's we enter Judges, right? And that's where they are in Judges. And Judges introduces, and so in Joshua, we just got this incredibly positive story. In Judges, we've got right at the beginning a few things that are introduced into the story that tell us that it may not be quite as positive in the book of Judges. And what are some of the things that in Judges we have right at the beginning? Because in Joshua, they divide the land and everybody is happy. What are some of the things that are introduced in right early on in Judges that kind of prepare us for some problems?
Fight about what they're getting?
Well, they fight a little bit about what they're getting. What does God do, according to the writer of Judges, that is going to create a problem?
Those other people left in the land.
He leads other people in the land.
Yeah.
When we get to the end of Joshua, we get the impression that there are only Jews in the land. That's it. Then we look at Judges, and we got other people living in the land. And, the people, and by the way, they're not people who came to the land. They are people who
were there
in the land. So they were there first. And they continue to live in the land. Understand.
They refuse to leave.
Well, we're in a different kind of world where you got people moving around, and so it's not like the world is now. So there are people still, tribes still living in this land. And the writer of Judges, though, interprets. I mean, we as a historian, or an archaeologist, you can interpret all kinds of different ways. In fact, you'd probably say, well, of course, they're not going to kill every living thing in the land. That's ridiculous. Certainly there were other people in the land. Archaeologically, that makes sense. The writer of Judges does not want to make, he's not talking about archaeology. And he's not talking about history, he's talking about theology. So why are the people in the land?
To test.
Because God wants to test his people. And that's what the writer of the Judges establishes right at the beginning. There are people left in the land that God knows are there. Because if God wanted them out, they'd be
Out.
out. He knows that they're there, and they're there to test the people. And if they are there to test the people, how did the people do on their test?
They
fail.
fail.
Fail. I'm constantly failing, right? And there's one sign of failure that the writer of Judges focuses on. And may tell us something about the audience to whom he's sending this. Maybe this is what they struggle with, because it's what the people here are dealing with. Maybe it's what his audience also dealt with, is dealing with. What is the issue?
Worshipping idols.
Worshipping idols, worshipping foreign gods. And we've talked about why that would happen in the ancient world, because there are a lot of reasons. But theologically, in the book of Judges, you can't do it. God said don't do it, you can't do it. And if you do it, what?
He gets rid of you.
Yeah, you're turning away from God. You've broken that covenant that's established right at the beginning, right at the end of Joshua, and reestablished at the beginning of
But they
Judges.
did it again.
They do it again and again and again and again. Worship other gods. And they start worshiping other gods, and they're the gods of the people who are living in the land. What's the result of them worshiping other gods? It's always the same.
God punished them.
God punishes them. And I'm glad you said that, because that's how the writer of Judges phrases it. It's not that they do it and then, bad things happen. They do it and God punishes them because they've broken the covenant. Almost in a sense, if you think about what we talked about a long time ago with Genesis, one of the things we see as a theme running through most of the Old Testament is that God provides protection. Like he did at creation. Remember creation, first chapter Genesis, what was at the beginning? Just water, right? All there was water. Water's an ancient symbol of chaos. Makes sense. Looking at the Mediterranean, sure looks chaotic out there. Water's a symbol of chaos. And so in the beginning, that's why the Spirit is hovering on the face of the deep. And what does God immediately do? He creates light in the darkness, and then he creates a bubble in the water. He creates a bubble in the water. And there's water above it and there's water below it, but there's a bubble. And in that bubble, God creates
Living things.
every living thing, everything. He creates skies, he creates land, he creates oceans, he creates everything in that bubble. Now, one time in Genesis, he withdraws. So God is providing this protection, right? And in Genesis, there was one story where God withdraws the protection, and naturally, what happens when he withdraws? Well, chaos reestablished. What was the story? The flood, sure. Water is a symbol of chaos. God withdraws his protection. Isn't going to keep, because humanity is, depends on which story you read, which it's either humanity of all of creation just goes nuts, right? And God says, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm withdrawing my protection. And what reestablishes? Chaos, right? Chaos is symbolized by water. So you have a flood that wipes everything out, because these windows of the sky open, the springs of the deep open, and chaos reestablishes itself. God withdraws his protection. After the flood, God says, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to let chaos reestablish. In a sense, that's what we've got going on in Judges. It's God is no longer going to protect the bubble he's withdrawing. And if the people are going to worship other gods, they are going to pay the consequences for their actions. I am no longer in a covenantal relationship. I'm not going to protect them anymore. And so they end up always falling to these people who are living in the land, the other people, who oppress them.
Yes.
And they're different. It's not the same. We got different people that are doing it, right? And what do the people do when they realize the covenant's been violated and they are no longer under this protection of God? What do they end up doing?
Praying, asking God.
They end up asking God for help. And we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to turn to you. We want you to help us. And God
Helps them.
helps them. Okay, and how does he help him in Judges?
Gives them a leader.
He gives him a leader. He sets a leader. And what does a leader do?
Leads.
Yeah, leads, and what's the result of his leading?
He gets them out of their,
Gets them out of the trouble. He defeats the enemy, right? Usually by calling together people,
Right.
not all the Israelites, but calling together people from the tribe, because the oppression seems to be regional. Sometimes it's in the north, sometimes it's in the south. But he the leader calls up the people, and they defeat the enemy, and he rules for a while, and the people are happy. But as we look at the Judges, through the book of Judges, they kind of have a pattern, right? And we start with Judges that are
Good.
really good and heroic, right?
Heroes.
You know, noble in every sense of the word. And as we go through the Judges, how does the quality of the Judges?
Less desirable.
They become less desirable. In some ways, they almost become more complex, you know, because they become less heroic and more mixed. You know, as we get Jephthah and Gideon and certainly Samson, who is a
not a
mess.
nice guy.
You know, he's a mess.
Yeah.
Samson's a mess. And so we get a decline in the Judges, the quality of the Judges, but they're still doing you got to put an asterisk beside, Samson, because Samson is unique among the Judges because he never frees the people. He never leads groups.
He just
It's always
kills them.
individual and usually for vengeance.
He kills them.
And kills them by himself. And he never liberates the people. It never says the Philistines were defeated and they lived in peace for 40 years. It never says that.
No.
So Samson becomes kind of a unique thing. Okay, so we've got Samson as the last judge in Judges. Last week we saw kind of an interesting little odd story. What made, and I don't need to go through the details of it, but what made that story that we looked at last week with the Danites and what was going on with them? What did we see in that story? Because it didn't involve a judge. That's sort of been introduced into the book of Judges.
I read it, but I wasn't here last week, so I don't know how you talked about it.
They didn't have their own land.
Okay, they had lost land. Interesting, they had lost land to foreign. And in the past, when that happened, what would have occurred? Because that's this oppression story.
They would have asked God.
They'd ask God for help, and God would help them, and appoint a judge, and He'd free them, and they'd live in peace. But that's not what happened in this story. What ends up happening?
Doing what they wanted.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a judge or anything.
Right, there's no judge that frees them. What do they end up doing? You remember what the tribe of Dan ends up doing?
Fighting somebody.
Yeah, they do. They end up fighting foreigners, but it's
Against their own.
yeah. They end up fighting against their own, and they end up migrating outside of the land that was promised. In fact, they take land from a peaceful people and make it theirs, and even change the name.
Yeah. Call it Dan.
Yeah, they call it Dan.
Yeah.
But it's not in. It's closer to what's called Aram, close to what is now Syria. So they migrate, which again, we're talking about migrating people. They just migrate up north, but they're outside of God's land. So, we've got a little different story. We don't have them asking God to liberate them in their land so that they can reassert themselves. They move. They make the decision to move. We start getting a little conflict within the tribes of Israel itself. So we get division, which we've seen alluded to with Ephraim, even with Gideon. Why didn't you call us to help you defeat? And we didn't need you. So we had some division, but this was more than what we had seen before. Well, what we're going to look at today, 19 to the end, is even more division, and maybe the most dramatic division of all, kind of giving what is the state of Israel by the time we get to 21, 25. And the state of Israel is going to be really bad. It's going to be a mess.
I didn't realize that sometimes you can have a father, a priest, just in the family. I mean, that they live with one family.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, if you had enough wealth, even in, probably now, but certainly in the last 100 years, in Britain, they'd have chaplains. A family that has an estate would hire a chaplain to be on the estate, and they'd have their own little chapel, and the family would go in, and the workers might go to the chapel, and that priest would be Episcopal or Anglican priest, would be paid by the family. The family would pay the priest or the minister or the rector to be there, the vicar to serve. Just a family chapel, not a church. It's sort of like if I was working for a family. If a family wanted to pay me.
Aww.
Yeah, that's right. Pay me and I work for them. It's weird. It's an odd story, worshiping other gods and so the Levites worshiping other gods. Okay, so we're in chapter 19. So we've seen a decline. Judges we're still slipping down. We're going to slip a lot today. What happens when chapter 19 opens? What does the writer tell us right at the beginning?
They had no king.
They had no king. Now, we've seen this before, right? We saw that a couple of times last week. Now, what would we expect to follow if it says
Chaos.
they have no king? Okay, the king is to provide chaos. Now, we don't know the writer's perspective on kings, and I told you that's going to be a big deal in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel. Should Israel have a king? Because there's a strong strain that says absolutely not. Because who should be the king? God should be the king. You don't need an earthly king because God's going to be king. Earthly kings are going to do things to you don't want. And we're going to see that later in Samuel. Earthly kings are going to take your kids to be in their armies. They're going to tax you. They're going to do things that you don't want them to do. That's what earthly kings do. You're not going to like that. Trust in God and God will take care of you. So it's this tension, but earthly kings provide stability, focus, and later they're going to see the earthly king as a sign of God. But we're not there yet. But when he says this was a time before kings, there were kings, we don't know his perspective yet. We're going to get a pretty strong indication in this story of how the writer, at least who shapes this part of Judges, how he feels about kings. I think it's pretty strong. We're going to find that out by what follows that statement, time before kings. If he is pro-king, thinks they should have a king, the story this is a time before kings, we're going to expect a story about chaos. This is before kings, therefore the people were going crazy. Or a story of great faith. This was a time before kings, and people were united in faith, and they didn't need a king because they were trusting God. So we'll find out how the writer feels about kings in just a little bit. Okay, who appears? So we've got this time before king. Who enters the scene?
A Levite.
A Levite. Now we saw a Levite last week, who was never named. He was just a young Levite who was hired to serve a sheet metal god, a god made with sheet metal, a god made on the cheap. And so we got another Levite here, and where's this Levite living?
Ephraim.
In the hill country.
Okay, he's in the hill country of Ephraim, but he's taken a wife, concubine. Some say tomato, some say tomato.
She wasn't really a wife.
Well,
concubine, right?
yeah, guys.
She lived with him as a wife.
Yeah, well, but the guys, her father's called a father-in-law. There's more of a commitment than just kind of passing through.
I sure misunderstood that.
So it's a complex relationship that we don't do now. Usually men who have concubines sort of hide them from their wives. This is a different world. So he's got a concubine, so the relationship is a little more formal, or accepted. Maggie and I had a long discussion about that yesterday evening. But a concubine. So what is the situation? So you got a Levite and he's got a concubine, and I don't care how you look at her. The wife doesn't. That's, I don't think, part of the story at all that she's a concubine. What happens with the concubine?
She was unfaithful.
Well, she does what?
She leaves.
She leaves it. Okay. And we've all been there when our concubines leave.
Yes. The wife's at the door of the foot one.
Yeah, that's right. And the wife is there with a rolling pin.
Rolling pin,
Okay, so the concubine leaves and does what?
Goes back to his father.
Goes to her daddy. And what does the Levite do?
Makes his second mistake.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about the first, because the first should be self-explanatory. What does he do?
Wants her to come back.
He goes to her and wants her to come back. And how is his approach to her described?
He wanted her to come. She took him into her father's house.
I mean, does he slam his fist on the table and say,
No.
"You're coming with me"?
No.
Good
No.
luck.
He went
Yeah.
to persuade her.
Yeah, so he's trying to persuade her. If you look at the Hebrews, it talks about tender talk, which is what Shechem back in Genesis, Dinah and that deal with Shechem, not
Did
very
you miss
pleasant
that?
story, way back in Genesis. Actually, it's an interesting thing because it caused the Levites to be in the situation they are without land. This whole deal with Shechem and Dinah. But same sort of thing. Tender talk. So he's talking to her tenderly. How does her father receive him?
With open arms. Glad he's come
Hot
back.
dog! I'm glad you're here, right?
Yeah.
So there doesn't appear to be any tension between her father and the Levite, nor does it seem to be anything in the Levite that would cause us to say bad guy, right? So the Levite becomes sort of and remember, we've got a guy shaping the story. So he's not writing objective history, he's writing a story, and in the narratives, he's certainly choosing now to shape it. So the Levite comes out as being fairly sympathetic. His wife, concubine, leaves. He comes back, begs her to go with him. Father doesn't have it's almost like the writer is trying to lead the reader to say, this Levite's okay. Now, that's important to file away because I think that attitude he wants to continue. The Levite's going to do some things that would cause us living now to say, that's awful, inexcusable.
Yeah.
In fact, another conversation I had with Maggie, because I wanted to know. I asked her, what are some of the things because I want to be sensitive to other people, what are some of the things that are offensive? That you could call somebody that I would mean as offensive, but they may be offended by. And she kind of helped me. We were watching a show that had an Asian contestant. And I said, is that appropriate for me to say Asian? She said, well, because she knows she's in college and she deals with that. So she explained to me what is now acceptable and what isn't, or what would be offensive and what isn't.
Acceptable?
Well, she said, you can see, she said, and it made sense. She said, there's nothing among her friends. She says, talking about an Asian person is fine. That's nothing wrong. You probably don't want to say Asians, like that's the only characteristic that's meaningful, to the person. Is the only thing that's of value is that she's Asian. That you probably want to be broader than that.
Yeah.
So I said, well, that makes sense. Anyway, so we've got the writer. Anyway, we want to be careful reading this through 21st century eyes. Okay, so the Levite then takes her, and what happens on the fourth day? So they've been there. Evidently, he's worked it out with his concubine, and what happens when they get ready to go?
What's the significance of the father keep encouraging him to stay
Yeah.
one more day?
Yeah.
Andrew,
One more day.
file
Enjoy
that,
yourself.
file that
That's
away,
probably a good
because I
answer.
think we get an answer later in the story.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, Deb, I think this is a really interesting literary device that the writer is using. And we'll look at it. I think it's really cool. Shows how sophisticated and what a good writer he is. Because on the fourth day, anyway, they're getting ready to leave, right? And the fourth day, Daddy says what?
Stay until, get towards the evening.
Okay, getting late, stay, one more day, we'll put you up, okay. And what does he do on the fourth day?
He stayed.
He stays. What happens on the fifth day?
He stayed again.
Okay, the father does the same thing, right? Spend the night, and tomorrow you can leave. So file that away. Why the writer? Because there's a reason why the writer would be including this in here. Because remember, every word he writes costs money, to it. So there must be a reason why he spent so much time writing about this exchange that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But I think it does. I think it does. Okay, so the father's begging him to stay. I will beg him to say, well, we got to go, right? We got to get going. So when they leave, where does the Levite and his concubine, where do they go?
Towards Jerusalem?
Okay, they are going towards Jerusalem. Now, we already know early on, in fact, we knew it from Joshua, what makes Jerusalem interesting or different. They're heading to Jerusalem. Who lives in Jerusalem?
The Jews.
No. No, they do not.
No,
They
that's
were
right.
Israelites.
That's right, they are Jebusites.
Oh, Jebusites.
The Jebusites,
Oh,
foreigners. In
okay.
fact, when they get close, because the servant says, maybe we should stop here. Because it's getting late. We've been traveling a long way. We're pretty tired. Why don't we stay here? And the Levite, and again, Levite, the job of Levites is to serve God. So that's what made it so ironic, the story last week about the Levite kind of being, working for hire. They'll serve any God. He serves any God that will pay him a salary. This Levite, you would assume, because he's a Levite, he is more in touch with God, because that's what Levites do. No, we can't stay here, right? We shouldn't stay here. We should press on. Shouldn't they stay close to Jerusalem? What's the only reason he gives for not staying close to Jerusalem?
They wouldn't go into an alien city.
It's an alien city. It's
Yeah.
foreigners who live there. And if we go to be with foreigners, they probably
Won't be as welcoming.
aren't going to be as welcome. They're not going to welcome us because they are foreign. Therefore, what we need to do is we need to go where? Where do we need to go? If we're not going to stop in Jerusalem, we need to keep on moving, right? Because we need to get to what kind of land?
Hill country?
We got to get to good Jewish land. We need to be around the people of Israel, right? Now, why do we need to be? Why do we need to reach the people of Gibeah?
Because it isn't really safe in some of the other cities.
Well, that's what he's saying, because they're foreign, and the only reason he's saying Jerusalem is not safe, although there's an irony there, because it's in the name is peace.
Yeah.
That's not safe because it's foreign. We need to get to Gibeah, because in Gibeah you've got, we'll accept them because we are brothers. We are brothers, Israelites, right? Not of the same tribe, because he's a Levite and his concubine's from Judah. But when we get to Gibeah, that's in the territory of Benjamin, right? We're going to be with our kinsmen. So they keep moving. Now think about the fact that the father, not only this decision, we got to keep on going to get to Jewish land. The father, please wait, wait another day. almost like it's a premonition kind of thing. Something bad is going to happen. He's insisted on going in spite of the fact that the father says stay. No, I got to go. We got to go. Can't stop in Jerusalem because they're foreigners and they'll treat us badly. Now I've got to get to kinsmen, right? So they finally get to Gibeah, right? And so they're in part of Israel again, right? And what happens to them when they get to Gibeah?
They sat in the city square that no one
Yeah.
offered to take them into their house.
Yeah.
Okay, they are now camping out in the city square. Now, so immediately we get, now he avoided going into the Jebusites, the land of the Jebusites, because they weren't going to show him hospitality. So he had to get to Israel. And when he gets to Israel, they will, of course, be hospitable. He gets to Gibeah and what?
No one.
No one's
No
Nope.
hospitality
Except
at
the
all.
old man.
At all. Oh, yeah. Now, this is in the evening. So they're camping out in the city square, right? Pitch the tents, got a little fire, cooking s'mores.
Yeah,
There. Okay, who comes in verse 16?
an old man. comes.
Okay, an old man who's been working in the fields, right? Now, where is he from?
Ephraim.
Okay, he's from Ephraim, but he's living in Gibeah, and the writer reminds us again that Gibeah is in the land of Benjamin. So if the writer keeps on reminding us, then the fact that Benjamin, that's got to be important, because the writer wouldn't continually remind us. Remember, Gibeah's in Benjamin. Remember, they're not in Ephraim or Judah, they're in Benjamin. So Benjamin's got to play a role in the story, or the writer wouldn't constantly be reminding us of that. Okay, so the old man is there. What does the old man say to him?
That they could come and stay with him.
Okay, they ask him, what you're doing here, in the square. Well, nobody's asked us into their homes. The old man says, well, you can come
Stay with him.
here with me because you don't want to do what?
Stay out here all night.
You don't want to stay out here all night. You don't want to stay out here all night. So what happens when they are together? So they go to the old man's house, the Levite and his concubine. Go to the old man's house. What happens?
Wicked men came to his house.
Wicked men come and surround the house and start pounding on the door. My goodness gracious, I am experiencing deja vu. When did this happen? Same sort of story happened before. It was a long time before.
Wasn't that with Lot?
Okay. When the story of Lot, and the angel, after he leaves and goes to in what city is Lot living?
Oh, Lord, I can't remember.
Sodom.
Sodom.
He's living in Sodom. And so the angel comes in the same situation. Lot brings the angel in. The house is surrounded by wicked men. So the writer is drawing a parallel, right? As the writer is shaping this story, man, it can't be an accident that he's using the exact same images. But a huge difference here. What's a profound difference between the context for Lot and the angel in Sodom and this story with the Levite and his concubine in the city of Gibeah? There's a huge difference.
They wanted the man.
They were.
Yes.
They should have been saved.
They were kin. We're not talking about people in Sodom who weren't for Abraham, and that was before they had land and all. But these are, not only are these kin, but these are the very people the Levite expected to show them hospitality. Not only did they not show them hospitality, they are showing them outright hostility.
Yeah.
And they're Israelites. They're from the tribe of Benjamin, so they're not even Jebusites. Remember, don't go to the Jebusites because they won't treat us right. Well, that's kind of ironic now. If he had stayed in Jerusalem, this thing wouldn't have happened,
Yeah.
you know, not in the city of peace. That's what Jerusalem means. If they had stayed with their father for another day, you know, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But it is. So you got the men surrounding the city. What does the same kind of thing? The man demands, the men surrounding the city
They want the man,
demands,
not
wants
the
the
man.
man, you know, to come out. What does the old man offer?
He went out and said he offered him his daughter.
Same thing that Lot did. Same thing that Lot did. You know, so we got the same story. And in the Genesis story, what's the end? How does the story end? What does God do to Sodom?
Destroys it.
Destroys it. So this is a judgment story. Since he's shaping it in the same way, we are led to assume what's going to happen to Gibeah.
It's going to be destroyed.
It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be judged too. Because the parallels are just too strong. If one leads to judgment, the other's going to lead to judgment too. And judgment from the Lord.
Why would he offer his virgin daughter to all those wicked men and not the man?
Well, that was one of the reasons I said we got to be real careful, you know, not reading this through 20th century, 21st century.
Because they didn't respect women?
Because women don't have the same place
Okay.
in society that men do. They aren't on the same level. And certainly not theologically with the Jews, the Hebrews. Actually, what's interesting is their status is a little higher in other ancient cultures. Primarily because in a lot of those other ancient cultures, you had fertility was so important because they were farmers. And so often in temples, ancient temples, they were female-oriented worship because you did things to make the ground fertile.
Yes.
You know, that's what you did. And so you wanted to appeal to the gods that would make the crops grow, and they were almost exclusively female because they were the ones that produced life. Yeah. So women had a real important theological role in a lot of these ancient cultures.
The fact that that is their role, you wouldn't think they would be considered useless otherwise. I mean, that they were disrespected or not thought as much of, since they're the ones that do give you children.
Right. Well, the thing is, and since Israel is a herding, you know, their history is herding. Mm-hmm. It's the ram that plays a more important role because the ram can impregnate a lot of ewes, but a ewe can only be impregnated once. And so the ewes become less important than the ram. The ram becomes really for a herding society. Yeah. And we see that reflected in a lot of the Jewish ideas. Yeah. Why was polygamy allowed for men but not for women? Well, because you needed it to support the population. You know, so the role of women in ancient society, that was dictated by economics and really demographics, population. And they just weren't as high. They just were not as held as quite in high esteem. Add to it the fact that so many women died in childbirth. So many women died in childbirth. So their mortality wasn't assured. So they just had a lower role, tended to have a lower role in society. And I'm so glad you mentioned it, Shelley, because when I read this with 21st century eyes, I'm looking at this guy and say, awful, awful, awful. God should punish him for doing such a terrible thing. Well, that's why we got to get into the context. You know, we got to get into the minds of the people who are writing it and reading it, because they wouldn't have viewed this as horrible. To protect the man, yeah, that's what you do. That's what you may need to do. 21st century, is it horrible? Yes. Here, you can't apply that morality in this and let that shape the way you interpret the story.
In the 20th century, the women would rebel and said,
well, and should. This is a horrible thing.
Yes.
This guy should have been held accountable. You know, the guys outside, they're bad, but they ain't done anything yet. Yeah. You know, this is a guy that says, you know, take her, please. You know, take my wife, please. You know, this is a horrible thing that he
Yes.
does. And the Levite does something even worse. And because they say, no, 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 we want this guy. And understand, in the ancient world, homosexuality male homosexuality is horrible. What makes male homosexuality so horrible in the ancient world? And it's universally horrible. Cross the board until we get to the Greeks and the Romans, who have a little different mindset. Why is it viewed as so horrible?
I don't know why, I couldn't understand why they would want to do that.
Well, why would it be viewed, though, as horrible, as absolutely horrible? I don't understand it. I don't understand why somebody would want to eat a bat, but God said you can't do it.
Yeah.
So, geez, I wouldn't have done it anyway.
Well, God would condemn them.
Why is homosexuality so universally condemned in the
Because there
ancient
wasn't a
world?
lot of women that they could make it.
Okay, homosexuals don't procreate. Homosexuals don't have children. They just plain don't. And when you're in a society where the survival of your society involves high infant mortality rate, huge, really high, female mortality, really high rate, really high. If you have a portion of your population that's homosexual, your society's in jeopardy because you're not going to produce enough people to keep it going.
Yeah.
You know, at best, you're talking about a line. If you look at population increases, you don't get a spike until somewhere, well, you start getting it, you know, in the 15th century. You start seeing world population growing. And then you get a real spike by the time you get to the 18th century. You know, people are eating better, fewer people are dying. So, you get this huge spike in population. But until you get to that point, population is static.
But even the old man that said it was a disgraceful thing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it is.
That way, yeah.
It is a disgraceful thing. And it, again, makes a whole lot of sense in context. That's another thing. If you look at it in context, both the way they treated the women and this, contextually, it makes a huge amount of sense. Do we want to apply it now? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But contextually, it makes a huge amount of sense.
Well, I thought that if he sent out his daughter, why is it that the concubine is the one that was found?
Well, because that's not who ends up going out.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, they say to the old man, no. And so what does the Levite do?
He took his concubine and sent her
Boom,
outside.
he sends out his concubine. Sends out his wife.
Yeah.
And what happens to her?
They abused her terribly.
They abused her all night. Okay. And what ends up happening to her?
She dies.
She ends up dying. Now, we've got this parallel between Sodom and Gibeah. How did they compare? The people in Sodom, and remember, God rained fire from heaven and destroyed the people of Sodom, right? Because they were so wicked.
Yes.
How does that compare to the Benjaminites in Gibeah?
Well, they're probably about as bad.
They're at least as bad, maybe worse, because even the Sodomites didn't kill anybody.
And the really mean thing, is when he walked out and saw her laying there, he says, "Get up, we're going to go."
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why we look at him and say, he's disgusting. The Levite's disgusting, the old man's disgusting, the men in the town are then all the men. That's what a woman reading that in the 21st century said.
Yeah.
Typical man, awful. We want to be careful because we got to read it within the culture because that's how it was written. In 100 years, people may read it different. I don't know how they're going to read it because the world's going to change in 100 years, 1,000 years. It's still going to be Word of God, but it's going to change. That's why it's so important to try to get into the culture. In the Old and the New Testament too.
Yes.
Why did Paul write what he wrote to the people to whom he wrote it? We got to get a sense of why he's doing it. We can't just say, well, he'd say the same thing to us. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. The situation may be different. The concerns may be different. But here, So I think we're, chasing a rabbit or reading it through the wrong eyes. If we say, well, the Levite is awful here, he's terrible.
Well, even then, when they didn't, respect women all that much, and they sent her out, the fact that what she'd been through, and she was just laying there and obviously in pain and whatever, that he had no conscience whatsoever about telling her to get up and let's go.
Yeah.
Even back then, I'm saying,
Yeah, absolutely, sure. Even if she was viewed as property.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that to a dog.
Exactly.
You wouldn't do it to your dog. And the response he gets when he says, let's go,
No answer.
he doesn't get an answer. Now, why does he not get an answer?
Because I think she was dead.
Because she's dead. He doesn't get an answer. And he knows she's dead, because what does he do?
He puts her on the donkey.
He puts her on his donkey and he
Went home.
heads to home. And what does he do when he gets home?
He cut her up.
He cut her up. Now, like I said, as we read this Levite, 21st century eyes, this Levite is awful. He's sort of like in something from a horror movie.
He's a murderer.
He's a murderer. And then he's mutilating. But I don't think that's the way the writer wants us to read it, because then we're gonna end up missing the point. The point is, to this point, the point is what?
He wants Israel to...
What is, to this point, yes, but to this point, before we even get to the cutting, what is the point the writer wants us to take from this story? Benjamin is bad. They are maybe worse than the worst people described in Genesis. The Benjaminites are worse. I think that's the point he wants the reader, that they are just that bad. And it's so ironic that, if he had stayed with foreigners, geez, it couldn't have been worse. Or if he had stayed, another day, couldn't have been worse. But he didn't, and this is where we're there. So he cuts the concubine up into 12 tribes, 12 pieces, and then sends them out. And what is he doing by sending those pieces? What is he attempting to do?
Communicating.
He's sending an email. He's sending an email to the other 12 tribes, a text message to the leaders of the 12 tribes. And what's the response?
They all come together.
Okay, they're going to come together. And it even says they send them to the tribe living in Gilead, which are why is that significant? Where is Gilead? It's on the east side of the Jordan. So it's not just the tribes on the west side, it's also the tribes on the east.
And they're the ones that stayed there, on the other side.
Yeah, we had two judges that worked almost exclusively in Gilead. And the tribes all the way up to Dan. And remember, Dan is now outside of the land, from the city of Dan to Beersheba, which is as far south as you can go. So this is communicated, and they meet in a place called Mizpah. Now Mizpah we've seen before, because it's a place associated with another judge, Jericho. And remember his story, he made an impetuous decision about his daughter. Or ends up, I will kill, if you give me victory, I will kill the first person out of my house. And it turns out to be his daughter. So I don't think that's an accident. That this isn't going to turn out real well. This isn't going to be great, especially what they end up deciding to do when they're in Mizpah. And so who is there? Who gathers at Mizpah? Who ends up gathering there? The leaders of the other tribes.
Yes.
And what is the writer emphasizing about who's there? These aren't just old officials. Who is there as well? Who have the leaders from the tribes brought with them?
Who did the
Army.
400,000 warriors. So the only reason you'd have 400,000 warriors is that
You're going to go to war.
you're going to go to war. Now, who else knows that they're meeting in Mizpah with 400,000 warriors, the Benjaminites. So now we've got, it's not just the people of this one city, it's all the Benjaminites are there. And what do the Israelites, the gathered people, what do they want to know?
They want to know how the awful thing happened.
Okay, how the awful thing happened. And who explains it?
The Levite.
The Levite. Now, that it's coming from a Levite, actually, that he's got credibility. Because what are Levites? They are the priests. They are servants of the Lord. So you think a Levite, even though the Levite last week wasn't so hot, Levites would have kind of a respect. It's interesting. I think I told y'all I was called for jury duty.
Did you have to serve?
Well, I've never served on a jury. And I was kind of looking forward to it. And when I get there, my number is like 50. There are 2 trials, and mine was like 50. So, there's a real good chance I may end up on a jury. And so the first one they have, they're talking, and, people are going up, and some are being disqualified, and they're asking questions, disqualified. So set the first jury, but they end up going through like 40 jurors. Prospective jurors to get there, and I'm like 50, so I figure I'm going to be on it. And then the next one comes, just filling out the thing would be me, and the next one you don't have a defense attorney, and so I'm thinking, he's defending himself, and I'm thinking, oh my dog, being on a jury where the defendant is going to defend himself, this is going to be fun. This is going to be really great. And so the district attorney so he gets to choose whoever he wants. There's going to be no challenges. Because there's no defense lawyer. So, I figure I am going to be out there. I'm going to be sitting in that chair. I'm going to listen to my first jury trial. And so, before they seat this new jury, seat this jury, the judge says, numbers, and they gave numbers, bum, bum, bum. And 50 was one of the numbers. You're disqualified. For cause.
Disqualified what?
For cause.
For cause.
Oh.
And I'm there, and one guy looks like he was disqualified in the first trial, but they told him to hang around. And he had slick back hair and had jewelry, so I'm thinking, and I'm disqualified. And a priest, a Catholic priest, disqualified was one of the numbers called. And as I was leaving, and they pay you, and I got my little thing. I don't even think I used it. I think I lost my little card. And I said, well, I'm not sure. Because a woman was beside me. She said, I don't know why I was disqualified. I said, I don't know why I was either. So I asked Cass here. I said, Cass, a lawyer, why would I be disqualified? And she said, because you're a minister. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh. And she said, it's because you're a minister. I said, well, why would they disqualify ministers? And she said, 2 reasons. And it was from the district attorney. I mean, not from the defense. And she said 2 reasons. One is the assumption that since you're a minister, you're going to be more compassionate. So you'll be more forgiving. So you may listen and say to the defense and say, oh, well, he seems like a nice person. He's not beyond redemption. That would be, she said, but the most important reason you were disqualified is the fear that you'd have too much influence in the jury room after the trial. That if a minister says something, it may carry a little more weight than somebody else. A little more moral authority. That's what's happening here. We got a Levite who's speaking with some moral authority. And so they're listening to him. Now, if it had been somebody from Judah, that's fine. But a Levite, you kind of
listen
up a little higher. So I'll never be on a jury. I will never be on a jury.
I don't want to be on a jury.
It has nothing to do with that story, but in my mind, since we started this, is there a reason that it was so close, and could this be the same Levite? Because he was in Ephraim as well.
I doubt it. I doubt it, mainly because the first Levite was portrayed in fairly negative terms. This one is far more sympathetic. Could be, but this one is sort of established as more sympathetically. So like I said, it's possible, but we're kind of moving in 2 different directions.
Yeah.
Nobody
That's
feels.
what I was trying to process.
Yeah.
If it was the same one, why.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
or why.
He would have had to change an awful lot, or at least the way he's presented has all of a sudden changed from being somebody who is not sympathetic at all to somebody, outside of the stuff he does. But I think we can kind of get that culturally. The fact that the father likes him, he's speaking tenderly to his wife to win her back. There's so many things in it early on that establish that maybe we're supposed to feel some sympathy for.
We're giving him credibility.
And then
We're giving him credibility because he's a Levite.
Right.
We wrote together Levite off.
Well, and I think that was, the writer was playing with that. The fact that, shows how corrupt Israel's becoming. That even the Levites are corrupt. I think that's important that it was a Levite in the other one. But here he's speaking with, and he tells the truth. I mean, he says what happened, right? And what ends up happening? So they say that he tells them the story. Now, what's the result of them telling the story? What's the response?
They all rose up together as one.
They all rise up together, and what do they say?
We'll take men of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel.
Benjamin has done something that is disgusting. This is just plain wrong. Now, finally, in Judges, what do we see happen? The tribes are united.
Yep.
They hadn't been united in Judges at all.
Yep.
Just every now and then a few of them come together to fight. Now they're all united, but what is the source of unity?
They're discussed over what happened.
Discuss over one of the tribes. So they're not coming to unity to conquer the land or to push out the foreigners or to fight for the Lord. It's because one of their kinsmen, a tribe of the kids, has become so disgusting in the sight of God, worse than the Sodomites. Mm-hmm. And what message do they send to Benjamin? Which is not unreasonable. They're united as these tribes have come together. What message do they send to Benjamin?
What about this awful crime?
Turn over the people of Gibeah, and we will deal with them, and then Israel will be okay, right? Unreasonable? No, very, very reasonable. How does Benjamin respond?
He said no.
Nuts. I've been, this in 1944, we are in the middle of the Battle of the Bulge, and I was just thinking of the commander of Bastogne. When he got the demand that they surrender, his response was nuts. And that's what they put. That's what he put. And the Germans didn't know how to translate it. Didn't know what it meant. Didn't know whether it meant yes or no. Until somebody that knew American slang could say, no, nuts does not mean that they're going to be packing up. So that's what they say. They say nuts, and what do?
They came together to fight against
They organize an army, but their army is
not as big.
not even in the neighborhood. They got 25,000, and they're facing an army of
40,000.
400,000.
400,000.
It's not even that close.
Oh my goodness.
That's right. So we got 400,000 against 25,000. Oh, but remember they had those left-handed warriors that could do a slingshot.
Yeah.
Really good with a slingshot.
Why do you have to be left-handed, do you think?
Don't know.
That's weird.
I don't know. What does Israel do before they go to war? Which is also something we haven't seen lately.
They went up to ask God.
Okay, they're in Bethel, which is where they have the tent, and they ask God. And what does God say?
It says Judah shall go first.
Judah should go first. Boom. Now we know exactly how the writer feels about kings.
Huh.
How does the writer feel about kings? He likes them. Why does he like kings? This story must have been a southern story, a story from Judah. Because God said, who should lead the people? Who should lead my army? The tribe of Judah. Where is David? Where will the kings From where? They'll come from Judah.
Judah.
You know, they'll come from Judah. So now we get when he says this was a time before kings, not only do we see this chaos that's going on with Benjamin, but Judah's going to take the lead. That's what we're going to see later in the books of Samuel. Judah's going to take the lead again. They're going to provide a king. Okay, so we got Judah's going to lead, and what happens when Israel goes into the battle? So Israel, led by the tribe of Judah, 400,000 go to fight the 25,000 Benjaminites. And what happens to them?
They cut down like 22,000.
22,000 Israelites die. And Israel, sort of like in the Monty Python movie, they all say, run away, run away. And they all run away, right? After the defeat, what do the defeated Israelites do?
They went up and wept for the
Okay.
Lord, before the Lord.
They go before the Lord and they ask the Lord what?
Shall we go up again?
Should we do it again? And the Lord said,
Go up again.
go. And what does Israel do?
They went.
They go out, and what happens? This time I feel in my bones it's going to be different. No, it's not going to be different. But there's only 18,000 died this time. So it is better. They're working in the right direction. You know. And they run away, right? They go back. And what do they do after the second defeat?
They inquired again.
They inquire again. Only we've got Phineas, and how it could be Phineas, I don't know. This story had to come from in the timeline had to been somewhere else, because who is Phineas?
Son of Eleazar.
He's a high priest, right? The son of, Eleazar. And Eleazar is the son of Aaron. So Phineas is Aaron's grandson. When did Aaron die?
A while back.
Way back in the wilderness. Way back in the wilderness. And remember, as we've gone through Judges, they've talked about there was 40 years of peace. There were 7 years of peace. There were 10 years of peace. All this stuff. And we've got Aaron's grandson is the priest here. He would have to be,
quite old.
He'd be like 400.
Yeah.
Clearly this story seems out of place, but the writer has taken the story and put it where he wants it, I think, to show this decline that's occurring. So Phineas cannot be alive. I mean, Aaron's grandson cannot be still alive after so many years. But he's there. So we got the priest there, right? And what does the Lord say? And they show him faith, which they haven't shown in a while, the other tribes. What do they end up doing?
They go to God again.
And God says, tomorrow, and this is different. What does he say?
He will give them to
I am going to give you to their hand. And what happens on the third day?
They set out an ambush and they went against the Benjamites.
They do some different strategy. But remember, if they win, who's caused them to win?
God.
God has. No matter what strategy they do, God has given. But there's a strategy, right? And what's the strategy? We saw this before. They did the same thing in Joshua in the city of Ai. Exact same strategy. What did they do?
They draw them away from the city.
Okay. They draw them away from the city. The Benjaminites come out of the city. The Israelites, 30 of them die as they run away, and the Benjaminites think, hot dog wouldn't kill 15,000 Israelites today, just like it's been every day. We're gonna win, right? And while they are chasing the Israelites, what do the Israelites do?
10,000 of the Israel's finest men in your frontal attack.
And what ends up happening?
They conquered, but the Benjaminites didn't even realize the dire straits they were in.
Yeah.
They are chasing the Israelites, chasing them, and all of a sudden they turn and look back and they see
Them coming behind them.
and the city, smoke from the city,
Burn.
the city burning, and they say,
They realized they were beaten.
yeah, oops. They say, oops. And what ends up happening to the Benjaminites? What ends up happening to this 25,000 man army?
They were struck down.
they are struck down. Almost all of them. The ones who were courageous were struck down. But not all of them were courageous. Who's left behind?
400 of them.
And what do?
Run to the.
Run away. They're hiding. They run away from the battle, and so they're hiding. What did the Israelites end up doing?
Let's see.
Burning the cities, killed everyone.
Burning the cities, kill all the people, kill all the
Animals and everything.
animals, everything. They kill everything. Now that reminds us of what? Back. Joshua. That's what happened with Joshua. Only
Sorry.
they were fighting for people in the land to conquer the land. The Israelites are doing what?
Fight themselves.
Fighting among themselves. They're fighting another tribe. Okay. Now, what was the vow made? So Benjamin is now facing what? What are they facing? What is Benjamin facing?
Extinction.
Extinction. I mean, that's what they're facing. Now, what was the vow made? And remember, go back to Mizpah. Because at Mizpah, Jephthah made a foolish, impetuous vow. I will, if you give me victory, I will kill the first thing coming out of my house.
It was his
Okay, what was the vow that the Israelites made
One
at
of them will
Mizpah?
give his daughter in marriage.
Okay, nobody can marry. Now there are 600 Benjaminite males shivering out in the caves. They're hiding out.
Yeah.
But the vow was nobody from Israel will give their daughter in marriage to Benjamin. Now what's that going to mean? If everybody is
They
dead.
won't have any.
They won't have any.
Yeah, it's like the children of men, that book, it ceases, you will cease to exist. Benjamin ceases to exist because there are not going to be any little baby Benjaminites anymore because no Israelite's going to give a daughter. Therefore, if you're going to have any Israelites, any Benjaminites, the women are going to have to come from somewhere else because of this bonehead vow they made at
the time.
Mizpah, right? Okay.
Well, their hour was running pretty hot.
Yeah, well, and now and they made the vow because of the sin, right, of Benjamin. Now, what happens after they discover this problem, that Benjamin is going to cease to exist, which means if Benjamin ceases to exist, what's happened?
How are we going to provide wives?
One of the 12 tribes is now gone. This is interfering with God's promise, God's will. It's supposed to be 12 tribes. Was going to be gone. What did they decide to do to solve the problem? Now they do something really interesting to solve the problem of the Benjaminites not having anybody to date.
They returned to the city of, is it Gilead,
Okay.
Gilead, who didn't come to their tribe meetings.
We took a note of those. We took attendance at the meeting, the big tribal meeting, and we noticed that a clan didn't show up.
I'm not happy.
Clan didn't show up. Should be some penalty for a clan that doesn't show up, right?
Yeah, well, they were wiped out.
Yeah, there's going to be a penalty. We're going to wipe them out. Not all of them. We're not going to wipe all of them out. Who are we not going to wipe out?
Every male and every woman who's not a virgin.
We're going to eliminate. We're going to preserve the childbearing women, and now Benjamin will be able to have children because we're going to kill everybody else, and we're going to bring these women to the tribe of Benjamin, and that's the 600 that are hiding. Now they're going to be able to have wives, and they'll be able to have children, so the tribe can continue. Now, remember, this is happening within Israel. I mean, they didn't attack Jebusites, Moabites, Edomites. They didn't get women there. They got women from one of the other, it's a clan, but within Israel itself. They've done this and wiped out good Israelite people, to get, just for the purpose of getting these women. It's like the Sabine women in Rome, bringing them back. But they find out that they don't have enough women. So they got to come up with.
They were more women, and they took women from, how do you say that, Jabesh, Gilead?
Yeah, they take those women and bring them back. And the problem is there's not enough women. So they've got to get more women for the tribe of Benjamin. And this is really sad. What do they do?
Tribes grieved for Benjamin.
Well, they're sad because Benjamin's going to cease to exist. But what do they end up doing?
They wait at the festival.
Yes.
To gain access to some single ladies.
And they put a bag on their heads and drag them off.
Yeah. Boy, honey, I love you so much.
Yeah.
Nothing tender there.
Yeah. Dating has changed a lot.
Yes.
Although Debbie still has her bag. She has it right on the wall.
Are you talking again?
No. Only that wasn't the bag. That was a bag I used to cover myself because I wanted a shot. And I figured the only shot I'd have is to have a bag. But that's what they end up doing to get women for the tribe of Benjamin. And just so that we know, all of this has happened, and this is a seedy 3 chapters, right? This is not a glorious 3 chapters to end Judges. But the writer tells us the problem at the end.
King. And everyone did as they saw fit, so nothing really was solved.
Those were the days when Israel didn't have a king. And it's all, we got like bookends. This is the way these stories started. These 3 chapters started. Israel didn't have a king. It ends. Israel doesn't have a king. So everybody did what they wanted. What do we expect to see happen when we move on in the story?
You would think there'd still be some anger.
There's going to be some anger.
There'll still be I would think, some uprisings until a king is appointed.
Yeah, we're gonna see some kind of king, right? Because certainly the one who shapes this last story thinks a king would be a good idea. Because if you want to have more problems like this, live without a king. Or, like we had last time with the Levite and the idol and the Danites, all that kind of nonsense. Live without a king. That's what you're going to see. Understand, though, as we get into 1 Samuel, that's not going to be a universal idea, even theologically, because there's going to be a strain, and we're going to see it in the story, a strain that says kings are the worst thing that's going to happen to Israel. Kings are the worst thing that's going to happen. Others are going to say kings are going to save Israel. Both of them are going to say it, and in a sense, maybe both of them are right. I don't know. But there will be these 2 strains that say you need a king because he'll help, he'll serve God. No, you don't need a king. All you need to do is focus on God, and God will lead you. You don't need a king if you got God. So,
But God knows at this point that we need a king, right?
well, this is certainly, and the reason I hesitate.
Not maybe a human king.
Well, yeah, okay, a leader, yeah, okay, yes. That it's going to be who is that going to be? Who is going to lead Israel? And you're going to have, just like we've seen before, within the story itself, you're going to have stories that are going to be linked together, but aren't necessarily complementary. Well, maybe they're complementary, but they're not identical. And some of them are going to lead in different directions. So, Denny, you're right. God recognizes they need leadership. And really the book of Judges has been all about what? The people not
Obey.
not obeying God.
Yep.
If the people had not worshipped idols and had obeyed God, then
They would be-
none of this would have happened. There would have been no need for judges because people would have been fine if they had, obeyed God. But they didn't, And so you're going to have this strain that says, well, the people need to start obeying. You're going to have another strain that says, well, if they don't, you need a king. And those two are going to run parallel. And we're going to see it because the first king is not going to be David, of course. First king is going to be Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. He's going to be from the tribe of Benjamin.
That's really,
Because even in 15 there, it says that the Lord made the gap in the tribe of Israel. So it's not like the people did. The Lord made the gap, so the Lord has to have a bigger plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think the compiler, the redactor, the one who organizes the whole book, because somebody is working with the stories and somebody, maybe the same person, but somebody is organizing the stories. I think that's why he puts it at the end, because this is a reminder God's still in control. This is in Israel, hasn't just gone run amok. God is still involved. Because remember, he gave the victory to the Israelite army. Because clearly they weren't able to win themselves, because they lost twice on their own. But when God said, I'm going to give it to you, give them over to your hand, that's when they're going to win. So God is still in control of this. It's how he's going to make his control known. Is he going to do it by the people being faithful and occasional judges straighten things out when the people go astray, or is it going to be through a king, and in particular not just a king but a dynasty? Is he going to do it through a family that will continue? Well, we're going to see we're going to see some other stresses, like, do you worship God in the temple or do you worship him in the tent? That's going to be a big deal in the books of Samuel. Should you build a temple to God? Because as soon as you build a temple to God, you're saying what? God dwells in that temple.
Yeah, that's
God dwells everywhere. And a tent that's constantly moving, that's God.
Yes.
He's not nailed down to one place. Well, that becomes it. And even within the work itself, it's not like there's only one answer. You're going to see two different answers. Particularly when you bring the books of Chronicles in. Because the book of Chronicles, the two books of Chronicles is going to have a whole different perspective on what we're about to enter next week. Because they're going to retell the stories of the books in Samuel and the books of the Kings are going to be retold in the books of the Chronicles, only from an entirely different perspective. Priests wrote the books of Chronicles, so it's from a priestly. So they think the temple is the best thing since sliced bread. David is in the great kings.
Ruth isn't very
Solomon is, because he builds the temple. He's the great king.
Will we do Ruth all at one time?
Well, we can. When we finish, then when we get this narrative, and then we got Kings to follow, and Kings is really depressing. But just interesting things you see, because so much depends on. We're going to see most of the stories. These stories have been drawn from different places. I mean, we got Ephraim stories, we got Manasseh stories, we've got stories from Gilead. Reuben stories. We got a lot of stories in Judges. We're going to start seeing it from the perspective of Judah more and more and more, because those are going to be the ones who write it. They're writing the history. They're the people who are living in Judah later, much later. And the person who writes the history gets to control what's said. And it's going to be the people from Judah that's going to increasingly write, inspired by God. So don't want to suggest that it's their theological mistakes, because I don't believe there are. But it's going to be their hands. So the northern tribes are not going to come off looking as good. It's going to be the southern, particularly Judah, that's going to be increasingly the focus, the tribe that matters most. But then they're not all going to be good. There's going to be a lot of stinkers from Judah. So, okay, we're finished with Judges. Uplifting book?
No.
No.
Why did he write it?
So.
Why was this written? Why was this written? Didn't have to be. Why did he write it?
Because I think he wanted to have the whole perspective about what happened in
Okay.
the tribes.
Okay. What lesson, so it becomes a good historical piece in that people later know what goes on. What lesson?
Fighting amongst themselves.
Okay? That's going to be a problem. When you start fighting among yourselves, you got a problem. What else?
And no leader.
No leader, that's a problem. What else? What may be the key problem in Judges? The key problem that led to all of this? Worshipping other gods. Worshipping idols. That's what got them into trouble. The whole way through. So, lesson to people
Who was it that
later.
carved there was a guy that carved the images. Who was that? I forget. In Judges, there was somebody that was carving up an idol.
Well, we got the talked about last week, and what
Oh,
I
maybe that's what it
don't
was.
remember his name. The
But there was
guy
somebody-
whose mother stole from his mother,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
Micah.
Micah, yeah, stole from his mother
Yeah.
and made these
Yes.
gods and
Yeah.
little gods, yeah,
Yeah.
that made it. But his gods were cheap.
Yeah.
Because they were made with sheets. They weren't solid silver. They were made with sheets of silver that the writer keeps on telling us. They were sheets, metal sheets. They weren't solid. So he did it on the cheap.
When you think about the whole thing, God is our Father, and He directs and protects us and leads us, and you as a father protect and lead your children, as it goes on. So I mean, it's. You know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. God never, and that's when we do communion. One of the things that I will tend to say is, because during the prayer before communion, we're thanking God. We thank God. And one of the things I almost always say is, God remained the God of Israel. Israel was still God's people. Now, Israel wandered away over and over and over again. And they paid the consequences for their wandering every single time. But God didn't cease to be their God.
Yeah.
And I think that is an important lesson also for us, that as Christians,
Yes.
that we may wander too. Christians may wander over and over, but it doesn't mean we cease to be God's children. It doesn't mean we drift in and out of salvation. It means we pay the consequences for our actions. And that's something that's also important. And sometimes I think we lose touch with that. We sort of assume that it's a get out of jail free card.
Well, you would think we would, after all this time, we would get it.
Well, we don't, because we're human.
Yeah.
We're human beings, and we don't get it. We just don't. And that's why I think on Sunday mentioned, sometimes we got to accept what Paul said at the end of the 7th chapter end of the 11th chapter of Romans. Who can understand the mind of God? Who can understand what God does? Paul's answer is not me. I don't understand. If Paul doesn't understand, you know what? It's unlikely Ed Rudiger is going to understand. He may come closer, than somebody else, because that's all he does is look at Scripture. So I may understand Scripture more, but do I understand the mind of God? Heck no. Heck no. Do I understand the Trinity? Heck no. Why is it Trinity? I don't know. I can't explain it. But it doesn't mean it isn't there. God speaks to me in ways that I can understand. But I'm limited, so I can't understand everything. And I got to accept those limitations. That's what makes the incarnation so important, is that He spoke to us in a way we can understand. But it's not absolute, because we can't. How can the finite understand the infinite? We can't. Sit down and think about infinity. If you can get your head around that, come and talk to me, because I don't know. I just see a long distance. Think about eternity. Where time has no meaning. Oh no, I got no concept of that.
None of us do.
But that's God. So he speaks to Ed Rudiger in images and in language he can understand because he's too stupid not to to understand
But
the
it's-
nature of
and
God.
he comes-
And that's okay. I'm fine with
And
it.
he comes to you in different ways, I mean, for you to get answers for certain things.
Oh, sure,
You
sure.
know, I mean,
sure.
sometimes it's not even like you hear him say anything, it's just there.
Right.
It's just there, he's
I'll tell you,
said.
that's why I think it is so powerful. And then I'm gonna let you go because this y'all have lives. This is my life. I think that's why God talks to us in stories. And I think that's why it's so important that we approach it as story, because story has meaning. All stories have lessons. That's why you tell a story. It's to have a meaning. It doesn't mean it's wrong. In fact, it means it's right. But a story has a lesson. And that's why God speaks to us through stories. Not just series of facts or series of events, because they really don't have a lesson. They're just a series of random events, that somebody has to take and do what with? Shape it into a narrative that now has a meaning. And now I've got a meaning. Now I can learn from this series of events. But it's because I've shaped it. And I've disregarded some and I've emphasized others, but I've created something that didn't exist. That's the way God speaks to us. Why? Because we're not real bright. We're not the sharpest knives in the drawer.
Yeah, we don't always understand.
Yeah, if he said, well, philosophically, that's why Christianity is I am happy to proclaim Christianity with the incarnation, because of the other, and that's why I get real bothered when I hear Christians talking about finding God. Because if we had to find God, give up. If it's up to you to find God, give up. You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. Because we aren't able to do that. We're not capable of doing it. Therefore, for us to know God, God had to find us. So God had to come to us, enter our space, become like us, so that he could talk to us in a way we could hear, we could see. That's the way God speaks to us. He doesn't ask us to philosophically grasp the nature of the divine. We couldn't do it. We worship ourselves, end up worshiping ourselves. So that's what God does for us. And that's amazing. That's what's truly amazing. And that's why the Word, because the story continues to evolve and grows and changes, because it speaks to different people at different times, because they take different meaning from the story. It means something to them different. Okay, next week we're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 1:1 through 4:1. Just the first verse in chapter 4.
1 Samuel what?
1 Samuel 1:1 through 4:1. And I'll have an outline, if you want it, for I haven't done it yet, for the books of Samuel. I don't even have a title yet. I have to come up with a title.
Are we skipping Ruth?
Well, we're going to stay in this narrative. Yes, because Ruth is a story that's is picking up. Ruth is it's kind of like Esther. It's sort of an independent story, and Job, that really doesn't fit into the narrative. The narrative, we're looking at the narrative, and the narrative is going to pick up in 1 Samuel. We may come back and pick up Ruth. That would be really cool to do. Just like we could pick up Esther. That would be, and let's not ever do Job. That's too hard. I mean, it's like studying Revelation. You just bang your head on the wall. Coco has always liked, she was mad because she likes Job. She's always been a Job guy. So, anyway, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep on with the narrative and to the books of Samuel. If that's what you want.
That's,
Okay.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, thank you so much for giving us this time together, and protect Shelley's Bible from a marauding dog. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.
When you were talking about jury duty, I had to get up once. They didn't take me, but Ron went. And it was years ago. I don't know if any of you remember, but years ago there was a little girl that was like kidnapped and gone. And this man who took her, raped her and did. Anyway, he killed her. Okay, so that's what he was going up to be. And when he got up and they asked him the questions, they said, "What would you do? How would you are you for the death penalty or whatever? And he looked at it, and he says, I take him up, hang him by his toes and get rid of him. They escorted him out.
That's, I think if you stand up and say, kill them all and let God sort it out, you're pretty much not gonna be on the jury.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it's just the district attorney.
Oh, yeah,
You know, if you got a defense lawyer, he's gonna nix you.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
the district attorney may say, ooh, that's the kind of guy I want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Ron
Yeah,
was
Drew
so,
was like that.
yeah, well,
Drew
Ron was
was
so,
Yeah, yes.
Ron was so angry, everybody
Oh,
was.
you know what Ron says?
Huh.
I don't even know why they waste their time on these I say, Ron, you can't get rid of a person that's wrong, no matter what they did. You can't kill them, just
Yeah.
and I understand, I know what he's
Understand the
saying
emotional
in
part.
his mind,
Yeah.
but no, that's not right.
Yeah.
And I learned so much when I went to work for the judge, because I thought, things were just cut and dry. Oh, no. He had books everywhere telling him what he could and couldn't do.
Oh, geez.